Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are finally talking about Spider-Man No Way Home. I just watched it and we are going to be doing a spoiler review for this movie. So if you guys have not seen this movie, I definitely recommend you guys go see that one, especially if you're a fan of Spider-Man. And so you can go here and watch and enjoy my thoughts on everything that is spoilery in this movie. And if you guys don't care about spoilers, then who cares? Just don't ruin it for other people who might care about it. That is what I'm going to stress most about this. If you guys don't want to ruin the movie for yourselves, that's fine, but definitely don't ruin it for other people. So let's just get right into this. I'm going to kind of go in order of the events of the movie. So I'll have little time codes for you guys if you are interested in seeing specific things that you want me to talk about. And towards the end, I'm going to talk about this trilogy as a whole, because I just had reviews up for the Sam Raimi trilogy and for the Andrew Garfield duology, and so I have those videos up as well. So I do want to talk about the Tom Holland trilogy as a whole at the end of this video as well. With that being said, let's just jump right into this. So this movie picks up immediately after the events of Far From Home, which would make it great as watching them both back to back. And so Mysterio has revealed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He's swinging through the city. All this chaos is happening, and what I loved about this entire opening sequence of his identity being revealed was when he finally gets to his apartment, and May and Happy are breaking up, and there's this incredible one-er shot of just going throughout the apartment of him closing all the windows. All this chaos is happening. Helicopters are arriving outside of his home, and it just really captures a fun, chaotic scene that is this character whose entire life has been flipped upside down. And it's just such a joyful way to watch this, because yes, it's a terrible moment in his life, and all these things are now going to be, a big question mark of whether or not he's innocent or not of the news and all the court of public opinion and all that sort of thing. But it's just such a fun sequence watching it all play out. And of course, the first spoilery thing I'll be talking about is the appearance of, Spider-Man's lawyer. He needs a lawyer to get him out of this situation because, everybody thinks he's a murderer, and J. Jonah Jameson is spreading all these lies about him. And so, of course, the lawyer you get is the one and the only Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, who was incredible in the Daredevil show. And this gets me so excited for so many reasons, because if you guys also have not seen Hawkeye, little spoilers for Hawkeye as well. We have not gotten the finale yet, but we did get a tease, the first image, the first look of Wilson Fisk in that show. And so we were officially bringing back those two characters from the Netflix Daredevil series. Whether or not that's still canon, it's still up for grabs. It seems like it possibly could be, or maybe they're just cherry picking the things that they like. Either way, Charlie Cox is back, and that is incredible. But really, the first act of this movie, as fun as that cameo was, as fun as this opening scene was of his identity being revealed, it really does push Peter Parker into making the decisions that he does and to create the inciting incident that progresses the rest of this movie. Because yes, that is a big part of it, his identity being revealed, and it really is a starting point for his character arc in this film, because Peter goes through a lot of growth in this movie, and it starts with his identity being revealed and him trying to fix everything and wanting everything to go back to how things were, but nothing can ever be how things were based on the consequences of what happened in Far From Home. It's really heartbreaking to see him, MJ, and Ned all struggle to be able to get into college, because all this perception, all this controversy around them is kind of pushing these schools away from accepting them in certain ways. So them as a trio is brilliant in this movie, and I've loved them throughout the entire trilogy, but this movie in specific, you get to see them all really struggling with the consequences of being a friend of Spider-Man, being an FOS, as Ned called in Far From Home. And so you have all this struggle, this internal struggle within all these characters, and Peter's guilt of having all these people around him suffer because of the decisions that he made, and him wrapping all these people up in his web, if you will. And so he goes to Doctor Strange, of course, to get the memories of everybody erased. But it doesn't start out that way. It starts off with Peter asking if Doctor Strange can go back in time and change things so Mysterio never revealed his identity, because that'd be the easiest possible fix for this. But then Doctor Strange jokes that there's a spell that can make people forget certain things, and he jokes that Wong has forgotten a certain party because Doctor Strange made everybody forget about that. And so that is kind of the reason of this. And another little thing that I thought was interesting was that Wong is actually the Sorcerer Supreme in this version of events, because Doctor Strange was blipped out of existence for 5 years. Now you have Wong being the Sorcerer Supreme, so he's kind of in charge of things, which is pretty funny. But then it kind of pushes Doctor Strange to kind of want to do these things behind Wong's back, and that gives him perfect character motivation to do the things that he does. Because yes, he is kind of responsible for the multiversal chaos that happens in this movie, but it really is Peter's pestering of constantly, interacting with this spell and saying, okay, MJ needs to remember me, Ned needs to remember me, maybe Aunt May and Happy needs to remember me, and things go to hell and things explode, and Doctor Strange contains the spell in that little, cube, or this little cage that, he used in the What If episode. So you're getting little bits and pieces of his powers that he used in What If in this, and we'll get into the after credit scene with Doctor Strange in a second here. But it really was an interesting way to kind of, show Doctor Strange's progression of a hero without, this movie really being focused on him. Because once things start going crazy, right after this, Peter is trying to apologize to the person who's kind of in charge of the school to try to get MJ and Ned into the school. And of course, that is where you get the first of the multiverse bending crazy things that happen in this movie. And I do want to talk about every villain in this movie. So first off, we're getting Doc Ock. He's the first one that's introduced here, and I love the fact that they yanked him directly from right before his redemption arc, essentially, in the original, Spider-Man 2 movie. And so you're taking his character right before he turned back good. The chip is still, causing him to think of these, darker and more, negative thoughts. The manipulation between the arms and his mind is all still there. So that's all still intact. His motivations of a villain is still exactly the same. And so they have a very, very intense action sequence with these two characters fighting. And of course, you love to see Doc Ock fighting in, any sort of movie, especially, the design and Alfred Molina playing that character. And no, this fight is not as good as something like the train sequence or the side of the building sequence in Spider-Man 2, but it is great to see this character back fighting a different version of Peter, and that confusion that lies within this situation was very interesting. And right at the end of the scene, which I thought was brilliant, right when, Peter uses the nanotech to essentially take over Doc Ock's arms, which is a very fun sequence, very different from what I was expecting. Once you see the picture, of Doc Ock having the nanotech in his arms, you think, oh, he's going to be unstoppable. But no, Peter can control the nanotech and kind of wrap him up in his own arms, which is very, very entertaining to watch Peter just, use his arm to kind of control Doc Ock's arms. It was very funny. And right when you think everything is happy and all good and the situation is all fine, Peter has wrapped everything up, you see the pumpkin bomb from Green Goblin bounce right next to him, and Doctor Strange just whooshes them back into the prison underneath the Sanctum Sanctorum. And so that was such a perfect tease of Green Goblin in this movie, because he is one of the greatest villains in this film. But before we get into him, we get into the other villains that are kind of introduced here. Doctor Strange has already captured the lizard, so that one is already in the cage, and Peter is given the task to go find these two, or find the rest of the villains with the help of MJ and Ned, of course. And Doctor Strange is going to kind of do his thing off on the side while they are responsible for catching all these things. So the sort of middle portion of this movie is going to be them capturing all these villains, so that's exactly what they do. And so Peter takes his old suit from Far From Home because it has some green goop spilled on it. He reverses it inside out, getting this really, really cool new toy that you could sell with this black and gold Spider-Man suit. It looks really cool, if I'm being honest, and it's just such a great way for him to have a new suit without having him make a new suit. And so he's wearing this new suit. He has MJ and Ned on his phone, like FaceTiming on his chest, and he's confronting the next two villains up on this list, which is Electro and Sandman. And you get their character motivations as well immediately right here, because you have Electro, and he has that blue design. He looks like a Smurf at the beginning of this movie, which I think is kind of interesting. And he starts, taking the power from these electrical lines, and it's this yellow lightning, and he's kind of absorbing this universe's different type of electricity. And this is a perfect way of saying, okay, this character is directly gripped from the Amazing Spider-Man 2. He was, building up all that energy, and that's the last thing he remembered before he appeared in this universe. And this type of energy is different, so his design is going to be different. He gets his normal skin color back, which is really cool to see Jamie Foxx be Jamie Foxx, and he's very entertaining in this role, and just the greatest redemption arc you could possibly have for a villain who is perfectly cast, just poorly executed. And then Sandman indeed does save Peter from Electro in one of his blasts when, Electro is starting to fight Peter, and then they have a quick interaction where, Sandman thinks, oh, this is Peter, I had some sort of a redemption with this character, and so you're my friend, I'm gonna try to help you take down this one guy. And so Peter and Sandman are working together in this scene, even though Sandman is still kind of, not really trusting the situation in general, but he knows that Spider-Man is kind of sort of a friend, and so they team up for a little while in this. But of course, things kind of go awry with that relationship later on in the movie in terms of making Sandman once again a villain. But once Peter's able to capture those two characters and they're back in the Sanctum Sanctorum, and now you have all these different villains, Peter gets a call from Aunt May saying that, you have one more visitor. They have just reached Aunt May, and so he freaks out, he runs there. And then it's the Green Goblin, and you see that he has destroyed his mask. You see Norman Osborn kind of takes back over from the Green Goblin personality. And that duality that they have in this movie with Green Goblin is one of my favorite things in this film, because Green Goblin is easily by far my favorite character in this movie, at least in terms of the villains. I really enjoyed his presence and his performance because, of course, when you have, Willem Dafoe playing any role in any movie, he's going to chew up the scenery. He's going to have so much fun, and I love him as this character. But ever since that first scene with him and Aunt May and Peter, you see that you just don't trust him because obviously we've seen the original, Spider-Man movie in 2002. We know his type of character. We know the hidden motivations with Green Goblin, how he's going to kind of sink in the background and take over once his time has come. And so it's a very interesting way to set up his character as kind of being friendly. But you have all these villains who are all in their own movies, and none of these villains were ever, interacting with each other in any way whatsoever. And so you have Alfred Molina's Doc Ock interacting with Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. They never met in those movies, but they knew of each other. And, Doc Ock's character knew the news and the story about, Norman Osborn and the news and all that. And so they have some sort of interaction there. Same with Sandman. He knew what happened. He knew that Doc Ock died and that Green Goblin died, fighting Spider-Man. And so you have even, Lizard and Electro have some interactions, and Electro saying that, oh yeah, Dr. Connors was kind of this mad scientist and he fought Spider-Man, and then he turned into like his own experiment, his electricity is formed, and they have all these interactions between these villains, and I really, really dug that. I never in a million years thought that we would get an interaction between Doc Ock and Green Goblin. It just never even came across my mind. That is something that really did surprise me in this movie. I'm very glad that they went that route because, later on in the movie when you have, Peter with all these villains after he decided to, lock Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension because he uses math to outsmart him in the mirror dimension, which that scene was so visually cool. It was just so entertaining to watch those two characters go at it. But I love the fact that they kind of push Doctor Strange off to the side. He's locked in the mirror dimension by Peter, and now it's Peter's plan of, instead of sending all these people back to their respective universes, he's going to try to cure them first and then send them back so they have a second chance in those universes. And probably my favorite scene, or my favorite sequence in this entire movie is, Peter and all these different villains all in Happy's apartment, and with with Aunt May and all these characters trying to brainstorm ways to cure these characters. And they cure Doc Ock first, and they have this thing put on the inhibitor chip, and he's healed. He no longer has those voices in his head, and that is such a great character moment for Doc Ock that you never got to see in the original Sam Raimi movie. And so that is just one little nugget of character growth that you get from these characters in this movie that you never got in the Sam Raimi movies. So it's not like you're just plucking these characters out of obscurity and you're throwing them in this movie and they don't have any growth of their own. Doc Ock does go through some growth. He heals and is able to use his, arms in ways of good in this movie. And in a very tense sequence, Peter develops something that's going to be able to stop, Electro from having that electric power. It's going to use, some sort of thing to absorb all of it so he no longer has those abilities, and it's going to make him, human again. And, this little green ticking, bars is essentially loading and absorbing all his electricity. And so it's kind of a ticking time bomb because you see Peter interacting with all these characters and you see a look of spider sense on his face and he thinks that something is going to be off, and he webs Goblin, because he knows that Goblin is going to be behind something. And then you have all this explosion of all these villains, deciding to do one thing. The Electro's character wanting that power from this universe. He has that confliction in his mind where it's like, okay, maybe I do want to be healed, but maybe I can use this, universe as my new playing ground to have all this power. He sees the arc reactor, Tony Stark's arc reactor, and he's so curious about how that will, greaten his powers. And so, like I said, a wonderful, reinvention of the Electro character from Amazing Spider-Man 2. I loved his motivations in this. Him being next to Green Goblin being the two main villains of this movie. I'd say he definitely was one of the more intense villains in this movie, and I love that Jamie Foxx was given that second chance. That's kind of the theme of this movie. This movie is a theme of second chances. And this is definitely one of the best action sequences in the movie. I really, really enjoyed the scene because of its intensity. You have that, like I said, that ticking time bomb aspect of, everything feels like it's going to go to hell, and it does go to hell, and the consequences of these things that Peter tried to do, he tried to help these people. He did the right thing in doing so. But a consequence of that is, yes, Aunt May does die in this movie. But before she does, she's able to have at least one great scene where she talks to Peter and has a great heart-to-heart with him before, she dies from her injuries because of the Green Goblin's bomb. He is responsible for the death of Aunt May, and she does have a line with great power comes great responsibility, which is a great way to throw that classic line into this movie without it feeling completely cheesy. As soon as she started saying, it's like, oh, she's going to say the line. Oh, she said the line, but it felt earned in this moment, and I felt that Peter really really needed to hear that, but that anger within him starts to grow from this point on, and you see that true sadness in his eyes, and it's such a very emotional moment. It's probably one of the more emotional moments in this entire movie, besides the ending, of course, but this moment really does impact and really does push Peter to grow in ways that he hasn't yet before. While all this is happening, MJ and Ned went off to protect this little box that has the ability to send everybody back to their respective universes that Peter stole from Doctor Strange earlier in the movie, and so they're kind of deciding whether or not they should push the button after seeing the news of all this terrible things that happened, hearing that somebody died, probably suspecting that it is Aunt May who suffered the consequences of Peter's actions here. Whether or not that is true, that is yet to be said. That is yet to be decided, whether or not Peter really truly does feel responsible for that, or whether he made the right choice. So MJ is contemplating whether or not to hit that button, and then Ned, having Doctor Strange's sling ring, starts saying something, and he's able to create a spark and create a portal. And so that's another funny little side storyline with Ned being able to use some magic, which is kind of played off as a joke, but I don't know if they're ever going to do anything with that in the future. Probably not. That's probably contained to only this movie, but it was funny, and it led to one of the greatest moments in this film. And yes, we're going to get to it. All you guys have been waiting for me to talk about this. We are going to get into the introduction of the multiverse Spider-Men in this movie, because Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are in this movie. So the portal opens, Ned and MJ see a Spider-Man in the distance, and as soon as that happened, I knew that was Andrew Garfield. Just the eyes on his suit, that Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit is so recognizable to me that as soon as he walks to that portal and he pulls out that mask and it's revealed to be Andrew Garfield, you can't help but to have the biggest smile on your face. And the banter between these characters is something that I didn't know I would love this much. Andrew Garfield just fits with Peter, or with MJ, and with Ned so perfectly. Their banter in this scene is hilarious. But then Ned, of course, tries to find Spider-Man again. He wants to find his version of Peter, but he opens up another portal, and Tobey Maguire walks through. And so they have a little conversation. They know where they can find Peter, having an emotional moment on top of the school rooftop. And this is a scene that I really loved, because Peter just went through the hardest, most difficult thing in his entire life. He lost Aunt May, something that none of the other Spider-Men have gone through, but they still have different things that they went through that they're able to help and talk Peter out from, that true anger that he's feeling. And when it comes to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield being in this movie, they're not just in this movie for the fan service of it all. Yes, it is fan service, and it's such a fan servicey moment when they walk through in that scene with Ned and MJ, but when they have this heart-to-heart with Tom Holland's character on this rooftop, they're talking about their different losses, and Andrew Garfield starts talking about how he lost Gwen. And they even have arcs in this movie. Andrew's arc in this movie really is, accepting the losses that he had throughout his life, particularly with Gwen and that guilt that he had with that. And apparently after that happened in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, he went on to stop pulling his punches, and he started being a more brutal version of Spider-Man, which when he was talking about that, I wish so badly that I could see that in some movie. It's probably never going to happen, but it's just the idea of thinking of that being something that happens in some different multiverse, where we see that happen if the Amazing Spider-Man 3 did happen, if it was, this storyline of him becoming a darker version of himself, starting to, be more brutal as a Spider-Man. That is such an interesting storyline, and him saying that I've been through this is such a perfect way to talk to Tom Holland in this movie, to kind of put him off the ledge of, becoming a more harsh Spider-Man without, becoming that version of him that he had experienced through. And you have Tobey Maguire, who has grown up. He's much older now, and so he has some wisdom. He has that experience that's, even the other two Spider-Man don't have in this movie. Tobey Maguire is definitely the most experienced and definitely the oldest of the three, and so he has different wisdom that he can put upon Tom Holland's character as well. And so even he, in a way, had an arc of kind of accepting the things that he did. And what I loved about this movie, I even mentioned it in my Sam Raimi trilogy review, was that they never really talk about the fact that after Uncle Ben dies in that movie, Tobey Maguire's character does chase after the guy who killed Uncle Ben, and he threatened him, and he fell through the glass, and he got what he wanted. The person that killed Uncle Ben was killed in that moment, and he kind of has a moment in one of the other movies where he mentions that he kind of feels some guilt over, that guy's death. Whether or not that actually was his fault is, a big question mark, and they never mention that again in those movies, yet they do in this film. And so you get, yet again, a sense of closure for Tobey Maguire's character, like you got some closure with, the Gwen storyline with Andrew Garfield. This movie is somehow able to get closure for some of these villains. You got closure for Doc Ock being able to be healed, to be able to be cured from that, inhibitor chip creating this thing in his mind that causes him so much pain. You have some closure with Doc Ock, or with Green Goblin's character later on towards the finale of this movie. There's so much closure for these other universes that I wasn't expecting. I was kind of expecting them to be in this movie, but I wasn't expecting that sense of closure for their characters, which I really did enjoy. And seeing the three Spider-Men work together to create these devices that is going to cure all these characters was a joy to see. They even have a moment where Ned calls out to them. They all start pointing at each other like, I'm Peter too. Which Peter are you trying to talk to? And it's very funny. It's directly that meme, that Spider-Man meme that I was hoping there was been the biggest missed opportunity for them not to do that meme in some sort of fashion in this movie, with having them all three in the movie. And that was definitely my favorite laugh in the entire film. I was dying during this entire scene. So much more of those characters than I thought we would ever get. And even interactions between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were great. There's a really funny scene with Ned talking about, oh, did you have a best friend? And then Tobey Maguire is saying that his best friend, turned evil and tried to kill him, and then he ended up dying. And so Ned is now terrified that he's going to turn evil and end up dying because of his relationship with Spider-Man, which is yet another hilarious laugh. I loved this entire sequence of the movie. And then, like I said, we get some great action in this film. In the finale of this movie at the Statue of Liberty that we saw in the trailers, of course, you have all three Spider-Men fighting in this scene, and even little moments where you see their different swinging styles in this movie. It's very attention to detail oriented. Tom Holland swings differently than Andrew Garfield, swings differently than Tobey Maguire, and their different styles of being Spider-Man is all different. They had yet another funny scene of them talking about, the web shooters and all that. It is so great seeing, several scenes of these three characters. One emotional scene, one hilarious meme of a scene of them being smart and them, creating these devices, and then one of them just relating as different Spider-Man. It is just so wonderful. But don't forget that this is Tom Holland's movie, and him being the main character of this movie, those two characters do not overshadow Tom Holland. Tom Holland is definitely going to be the main character, and they definitely do support his story and his arc in this film, because you see that rage boil in him, especially when Green Goblin shows up. But before that, they all have to, try to cure the different Spider-Man, and Tom Holland becomes a leader in this moment because he's the only one of the three that had an Avengers team to work with. He knows how to work as a team, whereas the other ones always flew solo. And so he has this great moment where he's, being the leader of these group of Spider-Men, even though he's the youngest of all of them. And I thought that was yet a wonderful moment for Tom Holland's character arc in this film, of him being the scared little kid from Homecoming all the way up until this point. And I will say, in terms of the villains, them fighting at the end of this movie is very entertaining to watch. Sandman's motivations is kind of iffy. I need to watch it again to see, because, he was friends with him at first, and then he locks him in the Sanctum Sanctorum, and so he's kind of angry at that, and he wants to be cured, but he also doesn't want to be cured, and so his motivations are a little bit, iffy and a little wobbly throughout this movie. But the point is, he's bad at the end of this movie, and he's trying to fight Spider-Man. He doesn't care what he's trying to do, and so whatever for that. But they're able to cure each villain individually. You get some great moments with, Tobey Maguire talking with Doc Ock, Tobey Maguire talking with Sandman. Once he is able to cure him, he has different moments with his different villains of some closure with them, having some interactions with each other. And same thing with Andrew Garfield. He has a moment to talk to the Lizard and have a moment to talk to Electro and that scene with Electro was hysterical. The kind of consequence of this movie is the fact that the original endings of those movies are no longer valid, kind of. Maybe that's just yet another branch universe of, there's a version where it played out the way in the Sam Raimi movies, and there's a version where, it ended kind of differently, and they came back, and some of them survived when they were meant to die. Some of them, there's just different endings for these characters now, which is okay, because this movie was such a blast. But once Green Goblin shows up, and you had that whole MJ falling scene, of course, Andrew Garfield, yet again, another sense of closure for his character. I think he got even so much more than Tobey Maguire in this movie. Andrew Garfield really did shine in this film as being just a standout character, because he does save MJ. He does catch her when he failed to catch Gwen, and there's a moment where, he's holding MJ in his arms, and he's starting to cry, and like, at first he's asking if MJ's okay, and then MJ asks if he's okay, because you can just see in his eyes that even though he didn't save the person that he loved, he was able to redeem himself and save somebody, because he did see that love between Peter and MJ, or Tom Holland and Zendaya, so he was able to redeem himself in that way. But then we get one of my favorite scenes I think every scene in this movie was one of my favorite scenes, but yet another one of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Green Goblin does show up to this final fight, and you have this really intense, nail-biting fight between Tom Holland and Willem Dafoe. And Willem Dafoe's performance, again, I have to commend it, because he is such a great version of Green Goblin. I'm glad that he didn't have the mask, because you can see his performance in his eyes, in his facial expressions, and it's so great to see him as a Goblin one more time, saying these things, blaming Peter for the death of Aunt May, and so all these different things that he's trying to guilt him, he's trying to build up his anger, and you see that hint of anger within Tom Holland's character that we've never seen before, which is a great indication of what they can do with this character in the future. And he's about to do it. Tom Holland is about to kill, and if there was no other interference in this fight scene, he would have killed Green Goblin in this moment for killing Aunt May. But Tobey Maguire jumps in and stops him at the last moment. And this is such an emotional moment, this closure of, Tobey Maguire saying that he's been through this anger because he did with Venom in Spider-Man 3. And so you have some closure with that as well. Again, closure in this movie. So much closure, but you have that moment between those two. And Tom Holland decides he's not going to kill Green Goblin, and Andrew Garfield throws the antidote to him, and they heal Willem Dafoe's character. And it's a very somber, bittersweet ending because all these villains are healed, but all these other villains are potentially coming. Doctor Strange can't hold back everybody. And you have a moment where Peter has to realize something that Tobey Maguire did in the first Spider-Man movie, where he has to let go of all the people that he loves in order to save them. And so Tom Holland's character decides that's this spell that to originally, have everybody's mind erased. His arc in this movie at the beginning was that he wants everybody's mind to be erased, but he wants to, still have that friendship with MJ or with Ned, and that relationship with MJ, and having Aunt May know, and having Happy know. But he has to decide to let everybody in the world and all universes forget not only that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, but forget who Peter Parker even was. And so you get some emotional goodbyes with, Peter with Peter and Peter, and you have some goodbyes with Peter and MJ and Peter and Ned. And that scene between Peter and MJ is completely heartbreaking, of them saying, I will find you, and we will find some way to work this out. And everybody's mind is erased. Everybody forgets who Peter Parker was. There's a very sad moment after, everybody had forgotten of Peter, going to Aunt May's grave, and he sees Happy there, and Happy doesn't even know who he is. It is so crushing to see these characters now losing all that, growth that they had throughout this trilogy of movies, and now that's all gone. And it's so tragic to see, Peter goes to potentially ask out MJ after all this has happened, and he decides not to. He realizes that they are better off without him because they're no longer in danger from knowing who he was. And so he does the thing that Tobey Maguire's character does, at the very beginning or the very end of the first Spider-Man movie. And it's such a great way to get Peter Parker in a position of, he's on his own now. There's no Aunt May. He has this crappy little apartment that he's going to have to struggle to get rent for. And he has nobody with him. He's now completely alone. He built his own Spider-Man suit that is without any of the Iron Man, technology with it. So he has his own Spider-Man suit, which is really cool to see. I know a lot of people are kind of iffy on that whole fact that Spider-Man relied so much on Iron Man technology in this MCU trilogy. But now you can no longer complain because he is fully, completely on his own, even more so than the other characters were in this movie, the other versions of Spider-Man. He's even more so alone than they ever were. And so it's a very bittersweet ending. You got a lot of fan service. You got to see all these characters return from past movies, and you had this amazing experience of seeing all that. And by the end of the movie, you get probably the most sad and just tragic ending for Peter Parker possible, but such a fitting ending for his character in terms of this trilogy. They tease that anger that's building within Tom Holland's character, with him and Goblin, and you get that whole first after credit scene with the Venom symbiote, which I love how they did that as well. I'm glad that we're not going to have Tom Holland's character, interacting with that version of Venom, because I don't really like the Venom movies. They're fun. They're very goofy and entertaining in like a so bad it's good kind of way. And so I'm glad that, Tom Hardy just showed up here in the after credit scene and he was zapped back to his universe, but a little piece of the symbiote was left behind. And that is just perfect. That's the perfect way to get the Venom symbiote in the MCU universe that's eventually going to find its way to Peter Parker. And hopefully the next movie, the next Spider-Man movie, will be a Venom symbiote suit movie. That would be really cool to see how Marvel and Kevin Feige does that storyline. Hopefully correct this time. But even that, I will be a little cynic here for a second here, okay? Just bear with me. So the whole storyline was that all these people, because of that original spell that Doctor Strange failed at getting, was pulling in all these characters who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Tom Hardy's Venom does not know that Peter Parker is Venom, or Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So why was he brought into this universe? it doesn't make sense. Even Sony just will do these things all the time where they'll pull different things in and it just does not make sense. So I just smacked my microphone because I'm so angry about this. But I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But you know what? I'm glad the symbiote is now in this universe that will hopefully react with him in the next movie. And of course, the after credits scene, the very, very end was a trailer for in the Multiverse of Madness for Doctor Strange, which very excited for that. But last thing I want to talk about in this review is just overall general thoughts on this trilogy as a whole. I love Peter, Ned, and MJ. Their growth throughout all three of these movies was great. I know MJ wasn't in the first one much, but it was a great tease of what her character could be, and Far From Home brought that into such a great space. And the chemistry between all three of these actors is so perfect that ending of this movie was such a perfect wrap to their kind of relationships in this movie, because now it started at one place and now it's in a completely new place, and now it's kind of starting from scratch with these characters. So I love all of them. It was very, very tragic to see that consequence of, everything that Peter did in this movie, that he's now on his own without them. And I think it's such a great growth of his character arc, because he did rely on the MCU a lot in these movies, especially in Homecoming, a little less so in Far From Home, and this movie even less so. It's definitely Peter dealing with, Spider-Man problems rather than MCU problems. And so now that he's completely on his own, he has a whole new chapter of his life to go through. And so if I'm ranking this trilogy in terms of the other Spider-Man movies, we have 3 amazing movies, whereas, the Sam Raimi ones, you had 2 amazing movies and then 1 less so amazing movie. And then the Andrew Garfield movie, you have 1 amazing movie, then 1 terrible movie. And so you have all these different back and forths with all these different trilogies. But we have now a solid trilogy, and I think my biggest complaint of this trilogy is not a complaint of the trilogy itself, because I love all of these movies, but you can't really watch all 3 of them without the context of Infinity War and Endgame and Civil War. So it's kind of 6 movies instead of just the trilogy. Like Sam Raimi, you can just watch those 3 movies and won't have to know anything else. In this trilogy, you kind of do need to know the context of the MCU as a whole, but really, that is such a minute complaint. I really don't have too many complaints about this film itself. Yeah, sure, you can say that the editing is a little choppy at the beginning because they're trying to rush through so many storylines. The whole, Mysterio revealing everything storyline has to kind of get rushed through so they can get to the multiverse storyline. And you can have different complaints. You can say that this movie is filled with fan service. You can say that this movie, does this or that, but it doesn't matter, because this movie was such a fun experience and it gave me everything that I wanted, plus things that I never knew I wanted from a multiverse storyline with the live action Spider-Man movies. Thanks guys for watching this video. If you made it this far, definitely leave a like, comment down below your thoughts on the movie, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see reviews just like this one. I'll have my best movies of the year list soon. I'll have a Matrix Resurrections review, probably a Matrix Trilogy review as well, because I've been rewatching those movies. So thanks guys for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel to see all of those different things, and I hope to see you all in my next one.